All right. Thanks so much for joining us, and we're going to jump right in. At CSI, we always start our events with an acknowledgement of the land that we're on. My name is Zoya, and today I'm joining you from Toronto on the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, the Seneca, and the Mississauga of the Credit First Nations. And I invite you to share in the chat where you're joining us from today and the land that you're on. As we talk about the next economy, we're often discussing a shared vision for a sustainable and just future. However, for those of us who are settlers on Turtle Island, on land that has been cared for by Indigenous nations for many generations, it's critical that we understand and reflect on Canada's past, in particular the mistreatment of Indigenous peoples, including the history and lasting impacts of residential schools, and the intergenerational trauma, continued systemic racism, and ongoing injustices that Indigenous peoples and communities face. During National Indigenous History Month and every month, we must reckon with the past to see the present more clearly. And we must center Indigenous voices, wisdom, and perspectives in reimagining what a more inclusive and reconciliation-focused economy could look and feel like. If you haven't already, we encourage you to review the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. And if you have the means, we are also going to add some links in the chat to organizations that you can donate to. And finally, we encourage you to look at this resource called Native Land to learn more about the land that you're on. Thanks so much for joining us today for Next Economy Conversations. If you're meeting us for the first time, welcome. The Center for Social Innovation is a community for entrepreneurs, organizations, and companies that are changing the world by putting people and planet first. At CSI, we connect our members to the resources they need to accelerate their success and amplify their impact, including online events and networking opportunities, education programs, and acceleration programs. The Center for Social Innovation Institute, our affiliate charity and event partner, helps Canadians use social innovation to get to the root causes of systems level problems. In this event series, you'll hear from incredible leaders who are helping to make the recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic one that creates positive change and that builds the next economy, one that is regenerative, equitable, and prosperous for all. And not just prosperous in terms of material prosperity and financial wealth, but especially in terms of belonging, community, health, happiness, and access. At its core, the word next really serves as an invitation to imagine, to co-create, to shape, and to participate. CSI believes that the next economy is sustainable, people-centered, circular, just, participatory, and equitable. It is conscious and caring, and it builds community wealth, health, and well-being. And the exciting thing is that the next economy is already emerging with inspiring examples here and around the world showing us what it can look like in action. And this event series is a chance to hear from those who are helping to build and shape this next economy. And without further ado, I am delighted to introduce our guest for this month, Kalen Taylor. Kalen is a social entrepreneur and co-founder of 3 successful social enterprises, as well as the president of Winnipeg Social Enterprise Center and a founding board member of the Social Entrepreneurship Enclave in Winnipeg's North End. Since 2018, Kalen has served as the executive director of Purpose Construction, a social enterprise that combines social housing development and rehabilitation with trades training and employment run by and for people underrepresented in the skilled trades. Purpose Construction completes over $2.5 million in affordable housing repair annually and currently has 4 single-family affordable housing projects in development in Winnipeg's North End, all of which are harnessing the power of social finance in the development process. Purpose Construction is run by and for people with barriers to entering the trades, including recent immigrants and refugees, Indigenous people, women, people transitioning out of the justice system, and members of the LGBTQ2+ community. There's so much more I could say about Kalen, but I'm going to let them share about themselves in just a moment. Kalen will be in conversation today with our CEO at the Center for Social Innovation, Tonya Surman. Tonya is fueled by her belief in the power of collaboration and belonging. She knows that putting the right people in a room is only the first step in creating lasting change. You also need to build a culture where everyone knows that they have a value and a voice to radically redesign our futures. She did this with the Center for Social Innovation, which reinvented the workplace by collecting social purpose organizations under one roof. And it's what she's doing with CSI's affiliate charity, the Center for Social Innovation Institute and Social Innovation Canada, unlocking the social innovation community to get at the root causes of problems. She knows that building relationships between people is the foundation for a better world, and it's also a heck of a lot of fun. So Tonya, I'm going to hand it over to you to get the conversation with Kalen started.
Marvelous. Thank you, Zoya. It is always, you're such grace. It's so lovely. And thank you for that beautiful land acknowledgement. And Kalen, welcome to Next Economy Conversations. I'm so excited to have you here. And yeah, we have so many things to talk about, but I do want to just say, meeting you a couple of years back through Social Innovation Canada and starting to discover the incredible work that was happening in Winnipeg is just continued to blow my mind. And so when Zoya and I were looking at how do we approach the questions, where do we start in developing questions for you today, we realized that we didn't know where to start. We didn't know where to start because you seem to be building circular systems from the ground up. We're looking at, do you start with affordable housing, trades training, energy systems, food systems, social finance? Like, where do you start, Kalen? I'm just gonna say, like, how about we just hear your story and then we'll just dig in along the way, and you can wrap this beautiful story together and give us some sense of what drives you and how you got to this, because I feel like the rest of Canada needs to know the extraordinary work that's happening in Winnipeg and in your community. So tell us everything. Start from the very beginning. Also, one thing I'll just start with, I can't believe you actually did your education in the thing you're doing. I don't think anybody does that. So you can even go there. So yeah, where did it all start?
Wow, thank you for that introduction. And I'm so glad that you guys framed the questions, because I also sometimes don't know where to start. It feels like sometimes weaving a single narrative through it all feels impossible. But I think for me, if I was going to try to, I think I have always been really, really connected with the idea of building physical things, building change that I can see and touch. And I think for me, that has a lot to do with growing up in a household of affordable housing developers. I mean, I joke that, like, I think I swore up and down I never wanted to be in construction as a child, because I saw what owning a small business does to my parents. But driving around a city and getting to point at things that your parents have built that change lives, they built cooperatives and they built cooperative housing and they built affordable housing, is incredible. Like, it creates this incredible standard, I think. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was also really impactful, I think, having a mother who worked in construction when I was growing up. And it was impactful in a lot of ways. I think I was incredibly proud of the work that they were doing and impressed by it. I had the only parents that I could, like, point to a building and be like, oh, they built that, Wow. But for me, I also grew up with her stories of how hard it was to be a woman in construction, specifically in the early 90s, the late 80s. She had stories when I was growing up of throwing up before site meetings because, it was so intimidating and the level of conflict and harassment was so high. So I think I grew up with this complicated tension when it came to building and construction, because in a lot of ways I loved it, and I grew up really close to it. And in a lot of ways, I grew up also knowing that it was not a place for everybody. Mm-hmm. It was certainly not a place easily for my mother for a long time. And, mm-hmm. For myself now as a queer person and as a trans person, it is absolutely not a place for me. Mm-hmm. But I think sometimes, if you want to do it, you've got to build it. Yeah. For me, what looped back actually later in life, because I didn't start out in construction, was watching my older brother, who I'm incredibly close to. But when he was a very young man, he had run-ins with the law, and he was in the justice system for a bit. And I mean, I think everyone is familiar, but if you have a criminal record, getting a job is somewhere close to impossible, right? Even in construction. Mm-hmm. So when he had 2 kids and he was ready to change his life, he was able to get a job working in the construction sector because my family was able to give him a connection. Mm-hmm. And now he's able to earn a family supporting wage where he is raising his kids as a single dad. He's able to do that, and he's able to do that well. That is because he's a white man, you know, living in downtown Toronto with parents who work in the industry. That's not an opportunity that's available to anybody. It's not an opportunity that's available to people like me. It's not an opportunity that's available to most of the people I work with in the North End of Winnipeg, right? Indigenous people and people with experience in the justice system, newcomers and refugees. We have a growing group of queer and trans people working for us who absolutely face, you know, a lot of discrimination working in the sector. Women as well. Like, I would love to say that I think it's gotten significantly better for women working in construction, but I don't think that that's the case. There's still a lot of porn on the walls, you know. It is 2021 at this point, but you know, less has changed than I think we want. So for me, watching the transformative power of construction to change people's lives and to pay truly family supporting wages, $80,000-$90,000 a year to someone who might not have any post-secondary education, it feels like this piece of the economy where there's incredible potential. And there's incredible potential to give people a leg up into a middle-class life that might otherwise not have the tools to do that.
Right.
But it also feels like the kind of opportunity that's offered really exclusively to white guys, honestly. So I got really interested in how we can start creating spaces where we can tap into the opportunities that exist in construction for people like me and people like the people I work with, you know, so that we can get access to those opportunities, and also the impact that lies at the other end of construction. You know, building houses for people who need houses is an incredibly intoxicating thing. It's really hard to stop once you get started, it turns out. It feels really good.
I can identify a little bit because it's, you know, as a woman just going into the real estate, into commercial real estate was a major challenge. I could just imagine how much more challenging it is to go into the development, into the actual construction trades. It's, they treated me like a little girl. They still do.
Yeah.
You know, that's really cute, little girl, you know.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
One of my favorite experiences is always walking onto construction sites and getting asked, and I acknowledge that I look young, but getting asked if I'm the co-op student, you know, and it's like, oh, I sign all of your checks. Like,
yeah, I'm the boss. Yeah. So
like,
take us back to, I'd love to hear, take us back to the beginning of your social entrepreneurship journey. Cause like, you sound like, first of all, I do have to say, to acknowledge and honor your family like that is such a refreshing, beautiful thing. So thank you. Like we grow and we become who we are because of the gifts and the challenges that our family creates. And it's just nice. It's nice to feel such love and appreciation. I'm a mom, so I'm a little, a little get soft, a little gushy around there, but I think it's really, these things are the things that do make us and that do guide us. And I think it's beautiful, but then you somehow or other, like you decided to make this your life. Like, tell us how that, and I want to get into Aki Energy, because I mean, that is, you know, national award-winning social enterprise stuff. Yeah, anyway, go ahead.
Sure. I think there's kind of two answers to that, and I love talking about Aki. So I started my career in the nonprofit sector, and I think a lot of what led me out of the nonprofit sector was the nonprofit sector. And I say this really lovingly. I think there's a lot that we couldn't get done without it. Sorry. But for me, I kept running up against the understanding that it's really hard to change systems when you're funded by the systems you are trying to change, right?
Right.
There was a whole lot that I needed and wanted to do that didn't feel possible when I was working with funding, when I was working with very short-term projects. You know, you ramp something up because it's kind of new and sexy, and then 2 years later, it's not interesting anymore and you can't do it. Yeah. For me, the independence that comes with earned income, the independence that comes with the fact that the money I get to spend on kind of interesting projects at purpose is money that I earned and we earn together, and then we get to reinvest into the company and into the projects the way that we need to, right? Like we'd have ended up developing, well, this is going to take us too sideways, but there are 1,000 opportunities that have come in my door that if I had to wait for funding to get them done, I would have missed it. It was what our teams needed at the time. You know,
I always say that the being a social enterprise has bought me my voice.
Yes.
Voice and choice, right? Like I can, you know, this particular series, Next Economy Conversations, is not sponsored by or funded by anyone. We choose to do this because
we can piss off whoever we want.
That's right. We're not beholden to nobody. So say what you want, Kalen.
Yes.
But that freedom is a critical. And I always say money is energy.
Yeah.
And if you wanna be able to have energy flow, you need to be able to take control of the money.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm not that interested in small pilot projects. We have
Mhm.
piloted a whole lot. I think in a lot of cases, we know what needs to get done, and it's about finding scale. And
Mhm.
for me, I think capitalism is an incredibly powerful tool. It's also an amoral tool, right?
That's right. That's
It
right.
comes with no guiding principles at all.
Mhm.
But in the moments where we can harness the power of market systems and we can use them to do something interesting, and I think Aki is actually the exact perfect example.
Mhm.
We start being able to do things that are incredibly impactful at a scale that starts creating the kind of impact I think we want to see.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so, for Aki,
So yeah, just explain what you did. I have a little description here, but why don't you go ahead and explain
sure.
what it is, just very basically.
Yeah, so my first degree, which I don't think got listed there, was in economics and political economy, and I helped start Aki right out of school. It was my very first project. I often joke that I've never had a real job. What I ended up doing was getting very, very, very fascinated, working at the time at an environmental nonprofit with pay-as-you-save systems. And this is, oh, I just saw the question, what is Aki? I will step back. So Aki Energy is an Indigenous-owned social enterprise that I was one of the co-founders of, along with Darcy Wood, who was a former chief of Garden Hill First Nation, and Sean Loney, who at the time was running an Indigenous-focused trades training company. And what we did, they still exist, and I work down the hall from them. So we have separation problems sometimes. But what Aki Energy does is work with First Nations communities to build geothermal energy and other renewable energy systems, but primarily geothermal, using utility financing as the economic tool that enables it to happen. So first off, we're using on-bill financing to create renewable energy that lowers people's utility bills from day one. It also increases energy security in the community. And we are ensuring that everybody who's installing those systems are local people we are training. So it's a job training program. And this is kind of a theme that runs through all of my work. I often talk about how it's about connecting the work that most needs doing with the people who most need the work.
Mhm.
So in this case, you look at First Nations where we have incredible levels of energy poverty. So we have energy bills that are $600-700 a month because the buildings are built so badly. And I'm only really familiar with Indigenous housing on the prairies and First Nations housing out here, but I'm sure it's fairly similar across the country.
Mhm.
Really badly built housing, and I don't know if you guys know Winnipeg, but it's cold here. It's not insulated, So energy bills that are incredibly high, unemployment rates that are incredibly high, and and I hate to be this guy, but a lot of job training programs that come into communities and train people for jobs that do not exist.
Mm.
Our first project was with Peguis First Nation, which is a mover and shaker on the prairies, just incredible. But there was a dog grooming training program going on when I got there, and I was like, how many dog groomers do we need on the prairies? So
Mhm.
it's about what we would go into a community, we would work out the financing using this on-bill financing system to install geothermal energy we aimed for at least 70% of the houses in the community. And that was both to create the impact, but it was also to make sure if we were training people to do this work, that there was work to be done.
Mhm.
We needed to make sure that we had a couple of years of work so that so that this made sense, honestly, so that we were creating well-paid jobs in a growth industry in the prairies. So that's
And I
maybe getting
guess
a little off track.
no, not at all. And I just want to point out how circular that is, right? I want to look at how you're brilliantly connecting the different needs and building a regenerative system, one that is moving us towards, regeneration of the energy itself, of skill building of the people, and solving a real problem of affordable energy in a local community, and all of it being quite circular, all through matching the different connections and building a virtuous circle, if you will, with the power of social finance. And I guess I wonder, what do you think was the thing in that was the most powerful? Was it this financing, this
Yeah, I was
on-bill?
going to say, I think it's the most boring part, honestly,
Well,
which is the
explain it.
ability to finance upgrades to your energy system on your energy bill. Right.
Huh.
And we do this all the time. In the prairies, we do this all the time. If I need a new hot water heater, my utility company will come in, they'll put it in for no money, and I'm going to pay $30 a month for the next year. I'm going to pay it back.
Right.
That's also how we financed all of the energy infrastructure in the country. That's how
Right.
we financed every utility pole, every connection to your home. The utility company paid for it up front, and we paid it back over time.
So so that was the nut that had to be cracked. You had to get them to
That's the
buy
nut.
into this idea.
Well, and when we first saw the idea, I was really lucky before Aki started to spend a year embedded in utility financing programs across the world. So I spent a few months in Yorkshire, England, where they were doing this exact same thing to insulate houses. They'd come into your house if you were low income, they'd insulate it for free. You'd pay it back on your bill, no money up front to you. And they were employing local people. And it wasn't at that point targeted specifically to folks with barriers to employment, but it was an interesting idea. And they were doing it also in Milwaukee and Portland. In Portland, they were really focused on equity and hiring, which I thought was really interesting. If you wanted to be the contractor doing this work, you had to prove that you were a woman-owned company or a POC-owned company. Like, that's a really fascinating idea to me, because it's about utilities, which at least in Canada, our government owned often on the prairies. You guys out there in Ontario. But it's about government recognizing when it spends its money, that money has impacts, right?
Social procurement, baby.
But through social procurement, right? Through deciding how you procure services as government, you can control who gets that work. So in Winnipeg, we can say, or, in Aki's case, we were saying, we're going to take advantage of this financing mechanism. We're also going to make sure that it's creating jobs in First Nations communities where the need is the highest. And it actually evolved into actually supporting those communities to start their own geothermal energy companies. So past a job, right, to community-owned companies and wealth creation. That becomes really interesting. So for me, it was the financing tool. It was sitting there in need of someone. We needed someone to do something interesting with it.
That's right. That's right.
But being able to go into communities and say, we can put in $5 million worth of renewable energy here, and it's not going to cost anything up front. It's going to save more money on your bill than it costs. Your bills go down from day one. And you're going to pay that back over 20 years, but the payments will be half of the savings. It just felt too elegant not to use.
Well, I mean, it's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. And so, sometimes, as Aki said, if it's not beautiful, anyway, the idea of that circularity was such a powerful concept, obvious when you see it now, but, not obvious as you're doing it. But then you also took these ideas into the food sector and Aki Food. So just real briefly, give us because you got some chickens in there that I want to talk about. I love my chickens.
Sure. So I think Aki Energy was taking this idea that you can use you can address kind of multiple problems in a community through a single solution, right? And often it's about, we used to talk about energy bills, like that's just money flowing out of a First Nation. You want to keep money circulating in that local economy, and you want to keep it local. Every time you pay a utility bill, it leaves the community. So we're like, how do we plug that hole? Like in employing local people to install renewable energy that keeps that money local.
She did it again.
How do we plug the holes in terms of the local economy while creating jobs, while meeting a community need? So I mentioned before that Aki Energy, I feel like I came with the dorkiness about the financing tool. That was my contribution to Aki's team. And our CEO is Darcy Wood. He worked for the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs for a really long time on their housing file. He's the former chief of Garden Hill First Nation. Obviously, he's a huge amount of the brains behind the operation, who we became. But at one point, I think like 4 years into Aki, right when we got comfortable that maybe we knew how to install renewable energy, we went to Darcy's home community of Garden Hill First Nation, and we were all so excited to work there and so excited to work on energy. And we got laughed out of that chief and council meeting, which happens more than you would expect. And it's a deeply humbling and important experience. But they were like, look around, energy is not the problem here. What we have is a food insecurity problem where 80% of our kids aren't eating every day. So they were like, go home and come back when you have a solution for a food problem. And honestly, I went home and was like, well, I guess that's it for us because we are a renewable energy company. And Darcy was like, no, I think maybe this tool can be used to address, more problems than energy. And at the time, I found that really intimidating. But one of the things, just to back up a half a step, that I think is important about Aki and important about social enterprise is for Aki, every community we work with joined our governance board. They were the only people on the board. So I think that renewable energy companies have a huge and really negative history to own up to in the North. I can make a coffee table book of the number of failed renewable energy projects sitting in the North that have cost First Nations money. that they've been asked to invest into and have been useless. There are so many. So I feel like we had a responsibility to ensure that the ownership of the company was.
Uh-oh. Kalen, something bombed and we can't hear you. Oh, no, still not. Zoya, who can you hear?
So I can only hear Tonya. I can't hear Kalen.
Okay.
There
you
we
go. Perfect.
Great.
Yeah, that worked.
Oh, amazing. Okay.
Keep going.
Just sort of remembering where I'm at. Okay, so to summarize quickly, the board at Aki is made up of all the First Nations we work with. And what that means is if we make a mistake, we put in bad systems, it's not working, they can fire me, right? They can fire Darcy, they can fire all of us. That felt really important to me because as a settler, as a white person, as someone from Toronto that had moved to Winnipeg, I think it's really, really important that we think carefully about accountability and responsibility in this work. Yeah. Anyways, all that to say, we took it back to our board. I gave this very good presentation about how there was no way we could do a food project because we are an energy company and it's important to stay focused. And I got laughed out of that meeting as well. And what we ended up doing was developing a food project. So that was the Aki Food. It became Aki Foods. It's still going. It's incredibly successful. The first project was about creating a chicken processing plant in a shipping container, to say it very simply. We were raising 999 chickens in a converted shipping container. So it was a shipping container. We built a greenhouse on one side of it. So we were growing vegetables. We were growing all kinds of fresh foods. The chickens were running around underneath. We planted a 30 tree orchard. At some point, I think now they're cultivating about 5 acres in a part of the country with a growing season that is 90 days long. And they're harvesting tons of potatoes. That took a while. But Garden Hill is a winter road community, so there are no roads unless it's the middle of the winter. It's a fly-in community only. So we worked with this incredible organic farmer who's been organic farming since the 70s and is one of the most in like prairie ingenuity, Yeah. He worked with the community to put everything they needed to build this farm into a shipping container, ship it up on the winter road, ditch it in a snowy field until it thawed. And then we went out, we worked with a group of youths in the community actually to build out the entire greenhouse system. It's fantastic. And you can find more out about it by Googling the Meacham Project, MEECHIM. There's a really cool YouTube video about it.
You're speaking to my core. My father's an organic farmer in Lindsay, Ontario. And I literally taking the compost out to the chickens. I'm grounding myself. It's so fun. Anyway.
Well, the first thing we got when we got up there is, well, we can't afford to feed these chickens and make the money work. So what can we do locally? And we ended up working with a local fishing co-op, and we were feeding the chickens fish guts. And
so good.
So we were raising chickens, and the community was raising chickens. We were slaughtering them at the end of the season, and we were selling them for a quarter of the price of chickens at the northern store.
Woohoo!
Right? Which is, they're not that hard to beat, it turns out.
No, it's very expensive. Those are, yeah.
Yes. So chickens at the northern store are $45.
Yeah. Wow.
And it's really hard to feed your family well when that's what food costs.
Once again, circular, community-based, locally based. It's so beautiful. Okay.
Like
I'm
conscious of. Yeah, go on.
I'm conscious of time, and we got to talk about purpose construction because this is your core. This is what you're doing now. This is an employment social enterprise. And when we talk about the next economy, absolutely circular. But one of the things is they talk about circular in terms of environment. And one of the things that I feel so strongly is that we need to extend this concept of circularity to include humans, that there is no human waste, that we must be efficient and that we must be matching and bringing the human assets into these circular systems. And I really feel like what you're doing here with purpose construction is that. So just again, really simple, explain what purpose construction is and what it does for the beginner.
Sure. So purpose is simpler than Aki. I think Aki is a very complex and interesting social enterprise. Aki is much simpler. At the core, we are an unfunded nonprofit. So I have a board because, again, I think accountability is important, but we don't get funding from anybody. We are a contractor. I'm a contractor that exclusively hires folks that no one else will hire. So I hire folks, and I think we've been over it, but Probably about 60% of the company at this point is folks transitioning out of the justice system, so people coming out of jail. Probably about a similar percentage is Indigenous. We have a fairly high percentage of refugees, queer people, trans people. Of course, all these things intersect 10 ways, right? We've got trans people coming out of prison and women. And so we hire the folks that other people don't hire. We are the folks that other people in some ways wouldn't hire. And what we do is we work at improving the quality of the affordable housing stock in Winnipeg. We do about $2.5 million worth of revitalization of existing affordable housing. And then for me, since I got to Purpose about 3 years ago, my focus has been moving us into affordable housing development. And I'm actually really interested in developing affordable housing for the people who work for me specifically. And I can get more into that later.
No.
That's
This is it. And so just give us a little history on the back. How long has Purpose been around?
Yeah, so Purpose is kind of a heritage social enterprise for Winnipeg. It's about 10 years old, so a lot older than me. It was started by a really good friend of mine, Lucas Stewart, who was kind of the dad of Purpose Construction. And 3 years ago, they were kind of he had a baby and he really wanted to spend a year with his baby, which I think is a beautiful thing. And Purpose was in a really difficult financial position. I think balancing what it means to be unfunded and to be a business and also to maintain social values is really tough. Yeah. And we were really good at the social and we were not doing such a good job at the business side. So we were actually looking at bankruptcy when I came into the role about 3 years ago. We are stable now. We stabilized within the first year. And this year we turned the biggest profit we've ever turned, and we get to take that profit and we get to, we're driving it back this year into creating an apprenticeship program for women, into affordable housing development and builds. I mean, when I make a profit, I get to do really interesting stuff with it, Yeah. So yeah.
It's amazing. So, and one of the things is I've met several of the other people. I actually know Lucas. And so it's wonderful to see how you've been able to bring this back. And so how many people are you employing? And just give us a sense of how much business you're doing and what's the magic? Like, what's the secret to working in these populations and making it work?
Yeah, I think so. We employ about 40 people. For us, it's very important and that unlike, because I'm unfunded and I feel pretty strongly about being unfunded, not that it's for everybody, many places need it, but because we're unfunded, I don't need to kick people out after 6 months, like most training programs, or a year. I keep people as long as they need to be kept. So I have a lot of like single moms, single Indigenous moms working for me who just can't work till 5. They got kid pick up at 3, which is fair, so do I. We're a construction company that can make room for that. So like I've got folks who've worked with me now for 8, 9 years, far longer than I've been there. So yeah, we have about 40 people working there. People tend to move up through the ranks from being a trainee to being a mentor to being a lead hand, all the way up to project management and leadership in the company. So that's important to us as well. So anyways, 40 people. Of that, I believe currently 94% of us are barriered in the trades, which is important. And we do about $3 million worth of work a year. That's been pretty consistent. Nice. And I think the magic is hard with Purpose because I don't quite know where it comes from. And I think I have Lucas to thank for it, honestly. I think that there is some of the most beautiful masculinity in Purpose that I have ever seen. There's the kind of mutual support that happens, I think, when you have teams of people who have been through really similar experiences supporting each other and supporting each other. Like we have guys who are training now for us that came through Purpose 8 years ago, but now they're raising their kids, they're raising their grandkids. They look at the folks coming into the training program and they're like, oh, that was me 10 years ago, and so they're incredibly invested in the folks that come in the door. But also we've really shifted in the last couple of years, I think. And some of the cross-pollination that happens to me is really fascinating. We're working with a newcomer who had incredible levels of PTSD. And construction sites are really hard if you've got PTSD because nail guns sound like guns, because it's loud and it's really triggering. And I came into the shop one morning at 7:30 in the morning, and this fellow Lee, he's Indigenous and he's been justice involved for a long time, and now he's one of our mentors. But he was teaching this guy how to smudge in our shop, because we've got smudge set up, of course. and was just talking about his trauma and the role smudging plays for him in terms of like moving aside from his trauma and try to like put it down for the day and move into a workspace, and like talking about where they're from, and like that's the kind of magic that I feel like I have nothing to do with at all, and is really about the kind of community and culture that's been built at Purpose that feels really, really magic.
Kalen, you're touching on something that is like probably a whole other conversation about the power of culture and how the founding DNA of an organization gets established. And I've been a part of many organizations, and I'm always struck at how that founding story creates a culture, and that culture then becomes this thing which grows and evolves. And then you as the leader then have to negotiate with it. Sometimes it's hopefully it's a good culture, it's a healthy culture like the one you're describing. Sometimes it's unhealthy cultures, and this question of how do we negotiate, integrate, how do we leverage, and how do we shift these cultures. But anyway, separate huge issue, but I feel that, and this idea of healthy masculinity and that caring for one another, that's the stuff of the real next economy, right? This is what the next economy needs to look like, is when we're embodying our authentic selves. We're bringing all of ourselves into these workplaces and being acknowledged and seen for who we are, and being honored and celebrated for what we can bring. And it sounds like Purpose has done that in a trade, in a sector that doesn't otherwise get the chance.
I haven't seen, I haven't worked honestly in a ton of traditional construction companies, but I've kicked around them a fair bit. And I can tell you for sure that I think we do a lot more hugging. And it's not even me. Like I don't love a hug, but like that was the biggest thing at the beginning of Purpose or at the beginning of COVID, is that the shop in the morning, everyone goes in, you get your tools, you get your job assignments, you go out. Like there's magic that happens in those moments at Purpose, and staying away from each other has been really hard.
Yeah, I bet. COVID's not friendly to we huggers. I hear you. Okay,
right?
let's get a little bit into the social housing, the affordable housing, and a little bit about the shared equity mortgage model. Like, just give us some of those goodies that you guys are working on. And I was just looking at the research about a Boldness Housing Lab and how the community led. Just give me some of that background.
Yeah. So for me, I think the transition to affordable housing came from a bunch of places, honestly. One, I think it's very cool. Again, growing up in a house where I got to see that my parents' work built houses that housed people who needed it, incredibly impactful.
There's mom and dad again. You're getting a little teary.
Mom and dad.
Me too. I'm getting a little teary.
That was really important. But I think for us, actually, as Purpose, it's a couple of things. As a business, honestly, most construction companies work in really cyclical. You get a big project, you hire a lot of people, you do the project, you finish it, you lay everyone off, you get the next project. That is how construction works. That doesn't work for me when a significant portion of my employees are on work release parole from prison. And if I cannot employ them, they are going back. They're losing their housing, they're losing their kids. So we don't get to lay people off.
Wow.
This is where we ran into the problem before. But if you operate as a business, you also can't keep everybody working if you don't have work, or you run into financial problems. So for me, building housing gives me a project I control, gives me a project I can put people on when the work is slow. It lets me, from a business perspective, control the variables far more than if I'm only working with clients. And I work primarily with affordable housing providers, which means that after March 31st, we have no work for 2 months because it's the end of the government fiscal year. Those are the moments when I get to focus on bigger, longer term projects I can afford. Or I can control, and then I can afford to keep people working. So that's the first one. The second one is that we have an incredible need in Winnipeg's North End. We're a community where we have a lot of vacant lots. We have, picture a street where you have a couple of boarded houses on any given block, and you have a couple of empty lots on any given block. Property's cheap, land is cheap, and there's a lot of need. In terms of the affordable housing stock we have here, well, actually, this comes from a story, but we had a woman working for us for a really long time who had done everything she needed to do to get her kids back out of care. She had been sober for 5 years. She had been working a job for 5 years. She had safe and stable housing. What she didn't have was access to safe and stable housing that had enough bedrooms to get her children back, right? Because the waiting list in Manitoba housing for a subsidized 3-bedroom unit is 10 years long. So she worked for us while her children aged out of care without her being able to parent them. And the pain of that, when that is the only reason you get up in the morning, is debilitating. And she was able to eventually find housing, and she got her 2 youngest kids back, but the other 2 aged out of care. And it was for a lack of affordable units with the right number of bedrooms. And that to me felt like, as a parent, there aren't any words. And as a person who runs a construction company, it felt like maybe it was something we could do something about. And so that's how we got involved in conversations about, and it was literally at the beginning, I was like, we need to build this woman a house. Like, I don't know how to sit with the pain of this unless we are doing something about it. You know, so we actually set out to build this woman a house. It took longer than that. But we ended up getting involved in a lot of really important conversations about this need in the community as it exists, broader than, you know, this employee that I had. And so we got involved in an incredible project called the Winnipeg Boldness Project, which is an Indigenous run social lab in Winnipeg.
With our dear friend Diane Rusin.
Yes, and the very great Diane Rusin,
yeah.
Who kind of adopted this. Like, I feel like I stumbled in her door being like, we got to do something. And she's like, yeah, honey, we all know that this is a problem. Like, pull up a chair and join the conversation.
Let's do it.
So we got to sit in on the North End Housing Lab, which was really focused on identifying what does this community need, so that it's not, you know, me running around with my idea, building houses, but it's really grounded in what the community of the North End needs. What are the houses we need to be building? What do they look like? How are they designed? Where are they? What are the barriers to people getting access to those housing? So through that process, we sat kind of in circle for about a year. And through that process, I feel like we identified a tool that feels exactly like Pays did for me at Aki, but for housing.
Yeah.
And it's a tool that is so elegant that it feels impossible not to use it. It's called a shared equity mortgage. It's probably the single most difficult to explain and boring, but I'm going to try. What a shared equity mortgage development model lets you do is, I don't know, when I bought my first house, my parents helped me. They gave me a bunch of money and it helped with the down payment and it helped me buy the house. It's a lot of people with privilege, like a lot of us have the same story. It's really hard to come up with that money yourselves. A shared equity mortgage model is about an investor coming in and playing that role. So in our case, we're actually working with CMHC, who has a shared equity mortgage fund, which I would encourage everybody to go look up. It's a fascinating tool.
It's modeled after the options for homes model, right, Kalen?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so what that does is have the government, in this case, come in as an investor and put down about 30% of the value of the home. The way that we're using the model, that 30% of the value of the home counts as the down payment. So we are now removing that upfront barrier to people, because the down payment is the #1 cost barrier to people getting into housing.
Yeah.
It also reduces the purchase price of the home. So, and using our developments as an example, we are building 3 new build houses on infill lots just down the street from our office. We're going to build those houses for about 240 grand.
Nice.
That's what it costs us before the prices of wood went up. But then I get $70,000 as a second mortgage. That's government money. It comes in as an investment. It lowers the purchase price of the home for the low-income homeowner by $70,000, and it replaces the need for a down payment. So suddenly what you're able to do is get into home ownership in a way that looks a lot more like renting, you know, because you're moving in and you start making regular small payments.
That's right.
The second mortgage sits on your house as a silent investment, a silent second mortgage. So you don't see it and you don't pay it back right away. What you are committed to doing is paying it back with interest, and it's relatively low interest rate. When you sell the house, so if you sell the house, you split it along equity lines. Basically, they own 30% of the house. They take 30% of what they exit with that. Or after 10 years, you refinance the home and you repay them in a balloon payment.
Nice.
So it feels like a very elegant tool. And for us, I think, what we get to do is wrap that tool up in a training program. So what if we use that tool? So we're creating housing that's more affordable and that's easier to access for folks. And can we do it when we're also using every single piece of the build as a training project?
That's right.
And for me, I'm also interested in how do we then connect the people building that house with the opportunity for that home ownership? Because I love what we do at Purpose. I do. And I think it's important to give people access to jobs, but jobs is really different than intergenerational wealth. And
Yeah,
intergenerational wealth is
building
what
equity.
property creates.
That's
You
right.
know, so can I go from providing people with jobs to opportunities to get into home ownership and opportunities to build that kind of safety for yourself and your family and that kind of intergenerational wealth?
Yeah.
That gets really interesting,
Yeah.
you know? And so that's what we're really focused on now. We've got 3 properties under development using a shared equity model and 1 existing property under development that's an abandoned house. It's been boarded for a really long time. And so we are redeveloping that as a rental unit. But I would
Kalen,
like to do a lot more of this.
Yes, and after this talk, with all the people who are asking questions here, that you're going to have lots of people. So what are the questions? So everybody wants you to do this. This is great. This is amazing.
We're going to try to do it.
And here's the question that's come up in the questions. And is this, purpose construction phenomenal? You have direct relationships with your 40 staff. I hear it. And this question of scalable. How scalable is this model? Is it being replicated elsewhere? Are you seeing this? And tell us the story. And I guess I'll just say, I want to come back to this issue of how we support building of equity. And maybe you and I can have another conversation with a few other people around, the shift from focus on jobs to focus on ownership, because I think it's fundamental to lifting people out of poverty, just so fundamental. And in Toronto, it's a nightmare because nobody can afford anything here. But But just
that our land is $13,000.
Right.
That's what I give for vacant lot.
Yeah, I got nothing like that here.
Yeah.
But that being said, so talk to us about the scaling, the replication, but who else is doing this? Can purpose scale? And I'll just say, if anybody's listened to my Next Economy conversations in the past, I am very suspect of the concept of scale in the way that we have traditionally thought about it. So yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've 2 answers to that. I think the first one is purpose. Yes, I think 4 houses is interesting every year. I think 20 houses is more interesting per year. And I do get interested in size. I have a stack of 100 resumes on my desk of people I can't hire who desperately need the opportunity. And I, again, because I'm not funded, I grow depending on how much work I have. If I have 20 active job sites, I can hire 100 more people. So within a small scale, the small scale scaling question is, I think we can do a lot more of this than we're doing, given a replicable social finance tool like a shared equity mortgage model. Again, not funding for each house. Secondly, at least in Winnipeg, I'm not the only employment social enterprise doing trades work. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to Build, who we all call the grandmother of the trades training in Winnipeg. They've been around 15 years. They're an Indigenous-owned program. Build could be doing this work, and we're actually working with them right now on getting them doing this work. We have several other amazing trades training programs in Winnipeg. There are also incredible trades training programs in Toronto, in Hamilton, in Kenora, in Saskatoon, and God knows there's tons in BC. So I think that this is a model, the financial model is available nationally. Once we know how to do it, I think it's highly replicable. And I would be really interested in looking at social enterprises doing similar work, replicating this model all over the country, because I know for a fact we all have the same problem with cyclical work. We all have the same problem, again, with getting kind of interesting enough jobs as well that people can sink their teeth into them. Houses are great because you get everything from concrete work to structural work to, you're doing the roofing. You get access to an incredible variety of skilled trades. Each one of those is a career path if they stick for you.
Yeah.
I think it's I'm interested in small scale replicability nationally. Do I want to be doing this nationally? Like, God, no. I've got a young kid and I would like to see my partner sometimes. Do I think it's a model that we can spread and share? Absolutely, I think.
Yeah, absolutely wonderful. I'm going to, we have a lot of questions and I don't know how Zoya is going to make sense of them all, but I'm going to ask you, Zoya, to come back in before and I'll say my thank yous and everything later, but go ahead and ask some of these. There are lots.
Many questions, Kalen, and there's also a lot of excitement and enthusiasm around the amazing work that you're doing. There was a question, or a couple of questions that were asking about, in working with people who have faced and continue to face different systemic barriers to employment. as you start to work with them, what sorts of supports or considerations do you make as a team? And there was a question of if you feel overwhelmed at all in that process, and how to make things happen.
Yeah. So yes, there are a number of supports that we provide to folks. And we do that in a couple of different ways. So we do that by taking on trainees in partnership with existing community organizations who can provide better supports than we can. So, one of those organizations that we're working with a lot now is called Strengthen the Circle, and it's an Indigenous peer-led prison exit program. It's it's one of the coolest programs I think that I've come across recently, but it started as a men's workout and kind of traditional Indigenous healing group, and it has grown into this kind of peer mentorship based housing supports, like this kind of nebulous and very, very interesting, very grassroots group of men supporting each other through this transition. We work a lot with them, right? So they're getting supports out of that place. Once they're here, we do provide housing supports and employment supports and a lot of that kind of basic stuff. We have access to an elder for all of our staff, for whom that's useful. We also connect people to counseling when we can. I think also it's about creating a job site where the folks mentoring you look like you, and have been through really similar challenges. And so, we had a guy like a week or so ago who got locked in a closet at work. It was an accident. He was in a unit and he was painting the closet and it locked. He had spent a lot of time in solitary confinement. And what he had was a complete meltdown. And everybody on that job site understood what was happening, because they had done it as well. And we joked that he busted through that door like Kool-Aid Man. He just went through the door, which was pretty incredible. And then the team took a break and we all went out for Subway sandwiches, and we talked about it and we made a plan. And like having a work environment where that kind of thing, where mental health is acknowledged and our needs around mental health are acknowledged and we have space and time for them is massive. So I think half the supports are cultural like that. They're like kind of baked into how we operate. And then we also offer a network of much more formal supports, right? Like we've got folks who can do casework with people if you need to work on. A lot of our folks have stolen a lot of cars. That's probably, if we're looking at who ends up with, it's a lot of minor drug charges and a lot of stealing cars. And so we'll work with MPI, which is our insurer here, to get people access to a driver's license again. We'll help them arrange payment plans to get that paid off. We'll arrange for deduction, for a reduction in the number of charges because they're working with us. We will show up at people's court dates and help them stay out of prison. We'll do all of that stuff, which I think you'll see from a lot of employment social enterprises. But for me, I think in addition to all of that, it's the cultural stuff. It's just working on a job site where it's okay that nail guns really freak you out. Sometimes we don't use nail guns, even though that would make the most sense for the job. But we can use hammers, it's fine. We can make those kinds of accommodations because we're not focused only on the bottom line.
Right.
I'm really focused on the break-even point. Like we can't really go beneath that, but I don't need to make a lot of money.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm. That's really incredible. And thank you for sharing that. There was also a lot of curiosity around the shared equity model and where it comes from, and also where can folks learn more about it?
Yeah, so I have to give credit to Glenn Kruk out of Brandon, Manitoba, and the Step Home program. I looked across the entire country for an affordable housing model that was going to make sense for me. I was looking for that mechanism, the financial mechanism that let me move. And I found it in Brandon, Manitoba, 3 hours away from me. I don't think that the Step Home program and Glenn have ever called it a shared equity mortgage model. I don't think, but that is exactly what they've been doing in Brandon while working with social enterprise for 10 years. And it's been this quiet kind of under the radar program. It's a brilliant model. So Glenn is actually retiring this year. The first 3 projects with us, he is mentoring us on really, really actively. And so it's been an incredible opportunity for me to get mentored by somebody who has done affordable housing development for their entire life using this model. And for us, what I'd like to do is take it, scale it, run with it, build it, but we didn't invent this model. This is the genius of Glenn Kruk from Brandon, Manitoba, at least in my life.
Yeah,
sure
well, and I think the model actually is was developed conceptually by Mike LeBay in Options for Homes, but it is a CMHC program, you're saying, Kalen. So I think that's the interesting question. So if somebody goes and searches out the shared equity mortgage model on the CMHC website, would they find
You'll
something?
get lots of information. And so yes, also, so Brandon, the Brandon model is where I came into contact with this model. Mike LeBay also has been doing this for a really long time in Toronto.
Yeah, they've done
And
some amazing stuff when
yes,
things were still affordable.
yes. And so what I realized really quickly as I was looking at the Brandon model was that this had been done across Canada by lots of people, right?
Yeah.
And not a lot of people necessarily tying in the social enterprise piece. But
Mhm.
I'm like, that feels like a bit of like a little magic trick we can tack on to anything.
I think that what you're getting at there is really critical, right? Because, you know, there was a social innovation with the shared equity mortgage, but then the social purpose in employment coming together again. This is where you're the circular entrepreneur, Kalen. This is why and like bringing culture and belonging. And I think I cried 3 times a little bit on this call. So I'm Zoya, this is my way of going to wrap up, because I'm very concerned that we're going to be asking our guests to go too long. But I guess my final question for you, Kalen, as we kind of wrap up is you know, when you look at the world and everything that you've learned about building these circular economic systems and bringing these things together, what is the secret? What are your words of advice? What can you offer to the 60 plus entrepreneurs and people who want this, to see more of this in the world? What do you suggest what's your gift to us?
Oh God, what an awful question. I don't know.
Ah!
I think in a lot of ways, I feel like I spend my days just solving problems, right? Like that's a lot of how you get to where you want to go. And you know,
what do you keep at the center? What do you keep at the center of yourself that gives you the energy and the guidance to move these projects forward and to keep you going?
I mean, I think honestly, just that this is the kind of company I want to work for. This is the kind of construction sector I want to work in. This is the kind of world I want to exist in. I think it's about going out and building that and solving problems until we get there.
I love it. Kalen, honestly, I knew that you would be so much fun to have on this conversation. I'm so grateful. The work that you do blows my mind, and the patience you bring and the energy and the vibrancy and the empathy that exudes from you is an inspiration for me, and I'm sure for many of our listeners. I just think you're fabulous, and I just want to support everything you are doing. And if there's any way that we can ever help, yeah, I mean, I'm just blown away. So keep on doing awesome things, and thank you so much for spending an hour with us today. Really.
It's always so fun to talk to you, Tonya. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
All good.
Thanks everyone for being interested.
Yeah, it's so good.
Amazing. And you can just check out the chat. You can see lots of gratitude and appreciation. And just to echo that, thank you, Kalen, for your time and energy, and Tonya for always insightful questions. And thanks to everyone who joined us and for your questions as well. We're going to wrap up. We did record this session, so we'll follow up in the next week or so with the recording, so you can rewatch it and share it with friends. And we'll also follow up with some of the resources that Kalen and Tonya discussed today. So thanks everyone for joining us for Next Economy Conversations, and we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Zoya.
Thanks, Kalen.
Much appreciated.